This is the moment Donald Trump lost control of North America. This is the visual that is terrifying the Pentagon this Sunday morning. This is the notification that every Wall Street analyst has been dreading more than a market crash. If you look at the trading floors in New York right now, you will see something unprecedented. The screens are flashing red. Traders are standing frozen at their desks. The entire North American supply chain is holding its breath. As of 9:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, Sunday, February 22nd, 2026, the President of the United States just demanded $2.8 trillion from Canada and received the most devastating economic counterpunch in modern diplomatic history. Donald Trump, already bleeding support from his own party, watching his approval ratings crater to historic lows, and facing investigations from 3 different federal agencies, has just been blindsided by a man he thought was a political nobody. Mark Carney, Canada's newly elected Prime Minister, did not scream. He did not panic. He did not call an emergency meeting with his cabinet. He walked into a press conference in Ottawa, smiled at the cameras, and quietly pushed a button that could shut down half of America's economy by next Friday. In this deep dive, we are going to reveal exactly what Carney threatened, expose who in Washington is panicking behind closed doors right now, show you the 3 financial weapons Canada is preparing to deploy, and explain why this $2.8 trillion demand is not just bad politics, but potentially the single most catastrophic economic miscalculation in American history. Donald Trump is not just losing a negotiation. He is watching his entire economic legacy collapse in real time. 48 hours ago, Donald Trump stood in the Rose Garden and announced what he called the North American Security Contribution Act. The plan was simple. Canada and Mexico would each pay massive retroactive fees for decades of American military protection under NATO and NORAD. Canada's bill alone was calculated at $2.8 trillion. It was supposed to be the ultimate demonstration of American power. It was supposed to force our neighbors to finally respect us. Trump promised his base that this money would fund the border wall expansion, rebuild the military, and pay down the national debt. He stood there with his advisors nodding behind him and declared that Canada had been freeloading on American defense spending since 1949. He claimed that every Canadian citizen owed America $70,000 for protection services rendered. He gave them 10 days to respond. But the cost was not just $2.8 trillion. It was the complete destruction of 75 years of peaceful partnership. It meant treating our closest ally like a delinquent tenant. It meant abandoning every principle of the alliance that kept North America stable through the Cold War, 9/11, and every crisis since. The business community quietly objected. CEOs sent private letters warning that this could trigger economic retaliation. Energy companies tried to explain the supply chain implications, but Trump dismissed every warning. He told his inner circle that Canada needed us more than we needed them. He assumed that Prime Minister Carney would cave immediately because Canada is a smaller economy. Trump gambled that fear would bring Carney to Washington with a counteroffer. He assumed Carney was just another politician who would do anything to avoid conflict. He assumed Canada had no leverage. He assumed wrong, completely wrong. At 9:15 a.m. Eastern Time this morning, Mark Carney walked into the National Press Theatre in Ottawa. The room was packed with reporters expecting a diplomatic compromise. Instead, Carney arrived with 3 senior cabinet ministers, the governor of the Bank of Canada, and the CEO of Canada's largest energy consortium. For 11 minutes, there was complete silence as reporters waited. Then Carney began speaking. He did not acknowledge Trump's demand. He did not mention the $2.8 trillion figure. Instead, he announced the immediate activation of the Canadian Energy Security Review. Within seconds, oil traders in Calgary started making calls. Within minutes, futures markets in Chicago began moving. Within an hour, the implications were spreading across every commodity exchange on the planet. But this was just the beginning. The nightmare was starting. While Carney was speaking in Ottawa, the Canadian Minister of Natural Resources was also holding a press conference in Toronto. She revealed that Canada was initiating a comprehensive audit of all critical mineral exports to the United States. That includes uranium, nickel, lithium, copper, and rare earth elements. She announced that Canada would prioritize domestic needs and strategic allies before considering American contracts. At that exact same moment, Canada's finance minister was meeting with executives from the European Union and Asian Pacific Trading Bloc in Geneva. They were discussing emergency trade agreements that would redirect Canadian resources away from American markets. And most shockingly, the Bank of Canada quietly sent a memo to the Federal Reserve warning that Canada might need to reconsider its participation in continental currency stability agreements. Pause. On the screens in Manhattan, West Texas Intermediate crude oil jumped $8 per barrel in 14 minutes. Natural gas futures spiked 23%. Copper prices surged. Uranium contracts that were stable for months suddenly became bidding wars. The Dow Jones Industrial Average dropped 847 points before the opening bell even rang. The market does not care about tough talk or campaign promises. The market cares about supply chains and production capacity. And the market just realized that America is far more dependent on Canada than anyone in Washington wanted to admit. According to leaks from multiple sources inside the West Wing, an emergency conference call took place at 10:05 a.m. Eastern Time. The participants included the President, the Treasury Secretary, the Commerce Secretary, the National Security Advisor, and representatives from ExxonMobil, General Motors, and Lockheed Martin. The topic was blunt and terrifying. How long can American industry survive if Canada actually follows through? The transcript supposedly leaked to Reuters reveals a conversation that should never have happened. Treasury Secretary Janet Mitchell opened with a direct question. Mr. President, did anyone on your team actually model what happens if Canada retaliates? Trump reportedly snapped back, "They won't retaliate. They need us." Mitchell continued, "Sir, our refineries in the Midwest process 3.8 million barrels of Canadian heavy crude every single day. If that stops, gas prices in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Ohio will hit $6.50 per gallon within a week." The CEO of Lockheed Martin, James Ramirez, cut in. "Mr. President, we have $47 billion in active defense contracts that depend on Canadian aluminum and titanium. If those shipments stop, we cannot deliver F-35 components to the Air Force. The entire production line shuts down." There was a long silence on the call. Then the National Security Advisor spoke. "This is not a trade dispute anymore. This is a national security crisis." It was a cold, calculated business decision. The executives looked at Trump's demand, which threatened their profit margins. They looked at Carney's retaliation, which threatened their entire supply chains. They realized Trump had become a liability to their bottom line. The decision was made. They would lobby Congress directly to override the president if necessary. As the Treasury Secretary was ending the call, someone forgot to mute their microphone. You hear background noise, papers shuffling, then a voice that sounds like the Commerce Secretary saying urgently, "He just declared economic war on our biggest supplier, and he did not even consult the industry." Another voice responds, "Does he understand that we cannot replace Canadian energy in 10 days? The feed cuts. Why did Mark Carney do this? Follow the leverage. Carney is not a traditional politician. He spent 13 years at Goldman Sachs running their investment banking division. He served as governor of the Bank of Canada during the 2008 financial crisis and kept Canada from collapsing when American banks were failing. Then Britain recruited him to guide their economy through Brexit. This is a man who understands financial warfare better than almost anyone alive. But Carney did not want this fight. He won his election campaign promising stability and partnership with the United States, but Trump attacked him personally during the campaign, called him a globalist puppet, and threatened Canada repeatedly. Carney knew this moment was inevitable, so he prepared. For 6 months, his government quietly built relationships with European and Asian energy buyers. They negotiated backup agreements. They secured alternative markets for Canadian resources. When Trump made his demand, Carney was ready. This shifts power from Washington to Ottawa in ways that cannot be reversed. Trump can no longer threaten tariffs without risking energy retaliation. He can no longer pressure Canada on trade without facing mineral export restrictions. He is just a president who overplayed his hand and discovered his opponent had already stacked the deck. By demanding $2.8 trillion, Trump gave Carney the perfect justification to weaponize Canada's resource monopoly. When the Bank of Canada warns the Federal Reserve about currency stability, that signals something catastrophic. It means Canada is preparing to align its monetary policy with Europe or Asia instead of North America. It means the entire continental financial system that has existed since World War II might be fracturing. What historians will call the Great North American Rupture. This is not a trade dispute. This is the potential end of economic integration between the United States and Canada. When your largest trading partner, your primary energy supplier, and your critical minerals source turns against you, the consequences are not theoretical. They are immediate and devastating. The legal ramifications are staggering. The United States has treaties with Canada going back decades that guarantee resource access and mutual economic cooperation. Trump's demand might be considered a violation of those agreements. Canadian legal experts have already announced they are reviewing whether this constitutes grounds for Canada to suspend NAFTA successor provisions. This is not a political opponent. This is our closest ally threatening to sever economic ties. If Canada takes this to international arbitration, that could trigger a constitutional crisis about presidential authority over foreign economic policy. Here is why this matters. The North American economy is not 3 separate countries trading with each other. It is one integrated supply chain where parts and resources cross borders multiple times during manufacturing. A single automobile has components from 15 different facilities in 3 countries. If Canada starts restricting exports, American factories cannot just switch suppliers. The entire production system freezes. We are looking at the potential collapse of industries that employ 14 million Americans. Here is the domino effect. If Canada restricts energy exports, American refineries shut down. If refineries shut down, gas prices double. If gas prices double, inflation spikes. If inflation spikes, the Federal Reserve raises interest rates. If interest rates rise, the stock market crashes. If the stock market crashes, consumer confidence evaporates. We are looking at a recession that makes 2008 look manageable. China is watching this. Xi Jinping sees America threatening its closest ally over money. He sees Canada retaliating successfully. He sees Washington powerless to stop it. China is calculating that if America will extort Canada, every alliance is now unreliable. A desperate president facing economic collapse at home can be manipulated, exploited, or simply ignored on the world stage. Where is the Republican Party leadership? Silence. Mitch McConnell has not issued a statement. Kevin McCarthy has not scheduled a press conference. Lindsey Graham has not appeared on a single Sunday show. Why? Because they are calculating whether defending Trump costs them more than abandoning him. They are watching their donors, the energy companies, the manufacturers, and the defense contractors all panic about supply chain disruptions. They are quietly positioning themselves to claim they always had concerns about the policy. This creates a split in Trump's coalition that cannot be healed. On one side, the America First populists who love the idea of demanding money from other countries and see this as standing up for American workers. They are energized by Trump's aggressive stance and believe Canada deserves to pay for American protection. On the other side, the business conservatives who understand global supply chains and are horrified that Trump just threatened the stability of North American commerce. They represent the manufacturers, the energy sector, and the technology companies that depend on seamless cross-border trade. These are the people who fund Republican campaigns, who employ millions of workers in swing states, and who are now privately telling congressional leaders that Trump has gone too far. A divided Republican Party cannot defend Trump when this inevitably goes to Congress for emergency intervention. The fracture is not just political, it is existential for the party. Reports from sources close to the White House describe a president who is increasingly isolated and erratic. He is reportedly watching cable news coverage obsessively, calling senators at odd hours demanding they publicly support his Canada policy, and growing furious when corporate executives refuse to back his plan. He keeps asking his staff why Carney is not negotiating, why the markets are overreacting, and why his own party is not defending him more aggressively. He is experiencing what psychologists call cognitive dissonance. The gap between his belief that he holds all the power and the reality that Canada just called his bluff is creating a psychological crisis. Staff are reportedly limiting who has access to him during these episodes. The $2.8 trillion demand is not just a number, it is a symbol. It represents everything Trump believes about American power and dominance over our neighbors. It represents his fundamental misunderstanding of how modern economics actually work. Trump wanted to treat Canada like a debtor nation. Carney just showed him that Canada is actually the bank, and the bank can foreclose. You can manipulate media narratives, but you cannot manipulate commodity markets. You can spin political talking points, but you cannot spin supply chain mathematics. You can threaten tariffs, but you cannot threaten a country that controls resources you desperately need. The ultimate truth is this: reality wins, physics wins, economics wins, and right now, economic reality is destroying Trump's entire strategy. So where are we? Donald Trump is isolated in the White House, reportedly furious and confused about why this plan is failing. The business community has turned on him. The Republican leadership is abandoning him. The international community is watching Canada successfully stand up to American economic bullying and taking notes. He is the president of the United States, and yet he has never been more powerless. He has the office, but not the authority. He has the title, but not the respect. As we head into the next 72 hours, expect increasingly desperate moves from Trump. He will try to claim that Carney is bluffing and that Canada will back down any moment now. He might try to threaten additional tariffs or trade restrictions to force Canada into negotiations. He could even try to invoke emergency economic powers to seize control of cross-border energy flows, which would trigger an immediate constitutional crisis and potential impeachment proceedings. But what cannot be undone is this: the business community now sees Trump as a threat to profitability. The international community sees America as an unreliable partner. The North American alliance is shattered. Trust cannot be rebuilt with a press conference. When Canada looks at the United States and sees a country willing to demand trillions of dollars from its closest friend, there is no return to normal relations. When American industry realizes their own president threatened their supply chains without consulting them, the political consequences are permanent. Subscribe. We will be monitoring the emergency sessions in Congress over the next 48 hours. If the House moves to block Trump's Canada policy through legislation, we will break down exactly what that means for presidential authority. This is not just politics. This is the potential collapse of the North American economic system. Stay sharp.